Good afternoon and welcome everyone to this exciting lecture in the Joseph and Rebecca Meyerhoff Program and Center for Jewish Studies. I am Max Grossman. I'm the director of the center, and I'm delighted to see so many familiar faces and unfamiliar faces or unfamiliar names whose faces I hope to see soon. It is a great pleasure to introduce to you today a scholar who's going to be talking about stuff. I'm a big fan of stuff. And as a scholar of religious studies and biblical studies, stuff is one of my favorite things to study.
Yeah.
Dr. Ingrid Lilly is an associate professor of religious studies at Wofford College in Spartanburg, South Carolina. She earned her PhD with distinction in Hebrew Bible at Emory University. And you need to know that to say Emory University in this context is to reference a graduate program well known for its innovative contributions to the fields of biblical studies, ancient Judaism, early Christianity, and Dead Sea Scrolls. So you are in fine company, and my understanding is that you were probably encouraged in graduate school to be not only thoughtful, but also creative.
Mm-hmm.
Professor Lilly's scholarship engages with the biblical tradition and ancient Judaism and Christianity with particular attention to the distinctive body culture that is reflected in their texts. I love that, and I'm stealing that. The students who are taking religious studies with me know that one of the things we've been thinking a lot about is embodied cognition and how that plays out in the context of religion. But I understand that your work today is work that draws widely on other fields as well, including medical anthropology, Mesopotamian medicine, cultural anthropology, gender studies, ancient Near East, and Greco-Roman comparative studies, as well as Hebrew philology. In and through her work, Professor Lilly demonstrates the importance of close, careful textual readings, the kind of work that we call philological, and that is very detailed and data-oriented, attending to the minute details of manuscript witnesses, language, and textual history. This is well demonstrated in her first book, Two Books of Ezekiel, Papyrus 967 and the Masoretic Text, as variant literary editions, which I enjoyed looking through and found just serious nerd pleasure. So thank you for that.
Very geeky.
In the same breath, her work deftly weaves in the insights of her wide-ranging methodological practices. The result is scholarship that works as both traditional, if you will, biblical studies and cutting-edge cultural studies practice. With that, I just want to say I'm delighted to welcome Professor Lilly to the Meyerhoff Center today for a discussion of enchanted substances, water, dirt, and air in ancient Hebrew and West Asian writings. Professor Lilly, the floor is yours.
Oh my goodness, that was so lovely. I forgot you were talking about me. I was like, that sounds so cool. What a wonderful way of getting to know me, Max. Thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be here. And Matt Soriano, great to see you. I know you, and I'm so excited to meet the rest of you and students who have your videos off. I invite that, and I'm happy for that. Maybe I'll entice you to turn it back on. I'm gonna go ahead and try to share my screen. You guys, I haven't done this in a while, believe it or not. How do I share my screen? Is it
You should
under,
have a green button labeled share that has a little vertical arrow at the bottom of your screen.
there we go. Just share, okay. I should have tested this. I'm really delighted to be here. I think I have to, oh no, I have to fix my settings. You know
That's
what?
okay.
I'm gonna send you a link.
Oh, for me to just,
Can I send it to you to,
so let's see, can you even put it in the chat perhaps? Or you want to email it to me?
yeah.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I'm actually pleased that I haven't been on Zoom in a long time, but
What a wonderful thing.
I know.
Okay. Meanwhile, everybody who's a participant, raise your hand. Do the little raise hand if you know a lot about Hebrew Bible.
Yeah.
Okay. Raise your hand if you know a lot about substances like dirt. Okay, you don't have to raise your hand now. Can folks see this? And then I'm just gonna, sorry, I'll go in and how is that? Did that work?
Yeah. It, It's good. I'm so sorry about this, but I think I'm gonna have to, I guess I'll just say next
Just
when,
say slide and we'll,
okay,
okay.
perfect.
Okay. Thank you everyone who's here. Thank you for your patience. And you can just say next and I'll hit the button for you.
Okay, so let's start.
Next slide. Oop. Is
I
that
can't, I can't see it.
oh. Can y'all see it or did I? Okay, so it's the bodies of water slide. Are you not seeing it, Ingrid?
No, just the very first slide, I don't see it.
Huh. Okay. Let's see if we exit slideshow. Do you see it now?
No.
Oh dear. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. Okay.
I did see it, but it popped away.
Okay, so let's try this one more time.
Is it, it's, it's
That's okay. We're getting very close. How's that? Do you see it
perfect,
now?
perfect, perfect. Yes.
Okay. Do you want me to put it in slideshow mode so the single
Yeah,
slide is visible?
that'd be great.
Okay, let's do that. Do you see it now?
I do. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you so much for your patience, everyone. Man, oh man, life. I'm so delighted to be here. It's so wonderful to be looking at my slides. It's actually really important that I have my slides because I've made this into something of a visual exegesis,
Mhm.
and I'll explain a little more about that. But I want to just start by inviting you to listen to a story that many of you are familiar with. The book of Ezekiel opens on a wild and visually rich scene of sensory emergence. Ezekiel is dwelling with the other captives by the river Chabar. When the heavens open, it says that he sees visions of God. But in the next two lines, we as readers are drawn into the unfolding of his visionary experience. Behold, a whirlwind, it begins, far off on the horizon. It's called a great cloud with fire and brightness at first. As this poetic prelude to the vision ensues, the visual descriptions replicate the experience of becoming engulfed, not just in a magical weather event as it rolls closer and closer, but also into a process of visual learning that is sometimes called ekphrasis, a visual learning about the natural and supernatural beings, the elements and the substances and symbols and sounds that configure Ezekiel's deity. Airs, waters, and fire, glowing, smoldering, thundering, flashing. Do you guys know this? It's amazing to go back and look. Glowing, smoldering, thundering, flashing, men with animal faces, creatures with wings, wheels spinning and humming, jerking motions, sweeping movements, a terrible rainbow. I can't believe it's called terrible, but the coloration is called terrible colors, shooting from the crystal firmament. This is a storm that approaches, and by the end, it is the appearance of the likeness of the glory or the glow of God. This book's combination of visualizing magical substances and the process of sensory learning is what I would like to attempt to do with you today. This presentation consists of all new slides, and it has been a while, as you can see, that since I lectured off of a PowerPoint. So I will have to be attentive to time. I have a couple of alarms set for myself. But in a way, this is going to be a divination experience. This is meant to be a coming into the presence of an unfamiliar thing, an enchanted substance. If it doesn't fit all in the time, or if it doesn't quite work, I think that's actually okay because Ezekiel was so overloaded by this experience that he was immobilized and muted for most of his book. And so either outcome, whether we have a divinatory success or a divinatory failure, I think you'll at least be able to go home and talk about it. Slide. So I want you to tell me briefly what you see. One or two folks. You can sort of say it quietly to yourself, but what are you looking at here? It's so weird because my classroom is so interactive. I literally don't lecture anymore. I just do this like kind of conversational development thing. Um,
Are you waiting for somebody to just talk?
yeah, one or two things about what you see.
Well, how about
Well,
An
streamline?
eddy.
sorry.
It looks like an eddy.
An eddy. I love it.
Well, it looks like somebody threw colors into something and then spin the wheel. Spin the wheel, yeah.
Oh, I love that image. Throwing colors and spinning.
And for that matter, it almost looks like a refraction, throwing a light through a refraction, and that's what you get on the other side. This
I love
side of
it. Rudy, thank you so much for answering.
You also have a few in the chat. You have a
Oh,
bunch in
okay.
the chat, in fact. You've
Let me-
got water, surface of the water, waves, strands of color weaving in, water with something looking like stained glass underneath.
I love that.
I
Yeah.
thought of was body cells.
Body cells. Oh, yeah.
Bone,
Right.
water
Seaweed.
and seaweed.
Yep. Seaweed, perhaps a coral. Slide. So this is a series of images by an artist. I have a lot of artists today, and I'm not going to mention them all by name, but their credits are underneath. That is called Bodies of Water. And I chose the first image because it's not very clear what it is that you're looking at. And the other ones you can see, this is a painter. I wonder if does this change how you've now seen that first image, seeing these bodies sort of rippling and refracted in the water. I'll just let you, I think I'll just let you imagine that yourself. I like, the chat is great though. If you want to answer there, that's pretty fun. So there's an experience that we have to go into when we're doing cross-cultural work of letting ourselves be, letting our perceptions change. But part of that is always engaging at first and then experiencing that new realization or that new perspective. Slide. I also want to get us ready for what it feels like to have images and text next to each other, because I've tried to do a lot of that in this presentation. He brought me up from a pit filled with uproar from muddy clay. In the chat, if you want to put thoughts, it's wonderful for you to just think it in your mind too. How does that text kind of work with this image for you? Does it make you see the image more differently? Does the image help you think about the text in a new way? I wouldn't be surprised if we're all a little uncertain about the idiom filled with uproar, but that I thought that was the best translation. Slide. And now this is the only pop quiz I have in here. I do want you to put an answer in the chat. Here's a text that may or may not be familiar, and blank will be the distinguisher between waters and waters. Any guesses?
From Genesis.
It might be. It's good guessing.
It's the firmament. I mean,
Yes. Well, some of you I would expect to have gotten that wrong. And I actually, slide. 2 slides, actually. Let's do 2 slides.
should I have waited longer?
No, that's okay. Don't worry. We're fine. We're in a relationship that's developing. Oh well, it is from Genesis, and it is the firmament. At a lot of points in that Genesis story, it's God who's making distinctions, but at first it's the firmament, and then it's named heaven, which is sometimes translated sky. That sky or heaven or the firmament has some role to play in distinguishing. I want to just start with water. Here's the Genesis 1 through 3, not where that passage came from, but let's just listen and sort of notice what substances that we're seeing here. When God began to create the heavens and the earth was complete chaos, and darkness covered the face of the deep. while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Pretty familiar, the last line perhaps especially. I really love teaching this text with my students, as I'm sure many of my colleagues do as well, because we really spend a lot of time in that first sentence. The fact that there seems to be things that pre-exist with God's presence. Darkness, there's a deep, there's a face of the deep. Are we supposed to imagine the physical face, or are we just talking about a surface? We have our own ways of approaching those terms in sort of enlightenment, but are we talking about the face of a deep? And there's a wind and there's definitely water. And I love talking with students about how water pre-exists creation, that there's something about water that makes it already. I hope you're starting to see why I might be curious about calling this an enchanted substance. Slide. So this is a familiar comparison for some, but in the one of the most important Babylonian myths that was recited year after year in many, many cities, along with many rituals, is called the Enuma Elish, that parallels the Genesis 1 account. In the beginning, I just want you to listen to those resonances. And just so you know, I've done a lot of underlining so that it just helps our eyes get to the place we need to be. But in the beginning, there was only undifferentiated water. This is my summary of this, swirling in chaos. Out of this swirl, the waters divided into sweet, fresh water, known as the god Apsu, and salty, bitter water, the goddess Tiamat. Once differentiated, the union of these two entities give birth to the younger gods. Tiamat and Apsu's first child is Enki, or A in Babylonian. I want you to remember that guy. When Apsu gets agitated by his rowdy children and seeks to kill them, Tiamat warns her oldest son, warns Enki. He puts Apsu to sleep and kills him. From Apsu's remains, Enki creates his home or his shrine on top of this Apsu, where he will become the differentiator between waters. Slide. So if anybody had guessed in my pop quiz Enki, then you would have been right. Go ahead and do another slide. Another kind of right. I want to give us a brief orientation as we go. I probably have way too much material, but I have an alarm to go off to stop us so that we can be rereading Genesis 1 and 2. But as we go through this learning, we're going to be talking, mostly from here on out. I may do a quick summary of Genesis just to get it on our mind, but we're going to be looking at ancient West Asian writings, rituals, prayers, incantations, some archaeology. I've tried to, like I said, put a lot of images to you. I want us to be thinking about water, dirt, and air as we move through this. Water, but when you think about substances, you're always thinking about its properties, all the ways, the forms that it can take. So with water, we want to think about floods, mud, types of waters. Is the water pure, salty, bitter, mixed, cloudy? We already just saw sweet water and salty water. With dirt, we may think about, I especially want to be focused on clay, dust, of course, but sort of pulverized substances are starting to get really interesting to me, or like dissolved substances, dissolved dirt. And then air, especially winds and storms, which obviously storms can combine with water. I don't know, sometimes I'm not sure if it's worth going into it, but I would like to just flag that creation poetry about the beginnings of things, can appear in a lot of different genres of texts, and you'll see that this is important. It wasn't just to tell about the beginning of the world, it was telling about the beginning of the world in order to explain or do something. So it was most frequently associated with rituals to establish shrines or temples, places that people would work or where their lives would be surrounded. Myths and rituals for the social world around the shrine, myths and rituals for the social world around royal cities, official temples, and centers of empire, as the Enuma Elish was. to introduce medical incantations and rituals. This is the one that I'm the most interested in these days. And also they're found at the beginning of a wisdom genre, this debate literature, which is really fascinating. Go ahead in the next slide. But so with those orientations, I'm going to ask you, go ahead and do the next slide, actually. I want to put visual, or 2 slides. Thank you. I want to ask you what you imagine when you think about the beginning of the world. This is a famous image. I'm going to go ahead and do the next slide, actually. I grabbed, I thoughtfully organized a number of images of sort of the beginning. The top right one is a world building fantasy class that I found, and I thought that was a beautiful image. You have this sort of mathematical Cartesian Big Bang. You have the universe that I've shown you, sort of this black hole kind of concept. You have a medieval Jesus with his measuring rod and the emergence of science. I wish it was a little more vibrant or easy to see, but the bottom left is a Jewish artist who has trumpets and language and words sort of like flowing all around together. And then the top one, The Water is Life, is more of like a folk tale. So these are, I mean, and if we had more time, I think it would be interesting to ask you, which one do you resonate the most with? Like, where does your imagination lie? It just helps to surface our perspectives so that we know how we're going to move from that perspective to a new one. Slide, 2 slides. I'm actually going to ask you to skip ahead because I was going to do this really fast, just sort of talk us through the Genesis story. So maybe just go slowly. I'm going to come back to these at the end. Thank you. That was a little, that was perfect. I asked you to go fast, but what we had there was an underlining of all of the substances, and I want to, if you're familiar with those stories, you'll be able to have them top of mind as we talk, and if you're not, you'll benefit from when we get to them. I want to move though to talk about the history of dirt, water, and air in West Asia. I'm going to talk a little bit about the first sort of second millennium, Sumeria and Old Babylonia. For the first millennium is of particular interest because it's the time period in which the Hebrew texts were written, and then we'll talk about Genesis 1 and 2, and we won't get to Job, I'm sure of it. Okay, next slide. So for thinking about this early story, we're to do this sort of cultural history of these substances. We're going to start with Enki, who's pictured here as the seated deity with water flowing out of him. You may recall that he was sitting above the Apsu, and he has fish flowing in and out of him. Next slide. So Enki is associated with the ocean, as we've already seen. He's underneath the earth. That's his sort of location, the Apsu, or his slayed father. Enki's main temple, he has several different temples. The city of Babylon is said to sit on top of the Apsu, so he's sort of mythically important to Babylon. Enki controlled the life-giving properties of water. Now, this you will probably like if you don't know this fact. His semen was, which is actually in Sumerian, it's the same word as water, so it's very difficult to know when we're being a little dicey and when we're just simply talking about water. But his semen was the sweet water, the fresh water that could irrigate and make fields from the Apsu. So he's doing this distinguishing work. In the Sumerian myth, Enki and Ninhursanga, the god Enki transforms the land around the salty marshes into fertile, economically productive ground using sweet water from the Apsu. Next slide. His creative powers pervade Sumerian myths. He's all over the place. The Babylonian counterpart of him, named A, creates and protects humans in the old Babylonian flood myth called Atrahasis, where Enki makes humans out of clay and blood. And in the Epic of Gilgamesh, it's assumed also that he plays that role. Just to give you an example, in this second millennium Sumerian myth, Enki and Ninmah, Enki, the fashioner of designs by himself, pondering the matter, he said to his mother Nama, "My mother, the creature you planned will really come into existence. Impose on him the work of carrying baskets. You should knead clay from the top of the Abzu. The birth goddesses will nip off the clay and you shall bring the form into existence." Thinking a little bit, if you know Genesis 2 and this idea of forming from dirt or dust on the ground, very interesting here that it's the combination of the waters from the Apsu, but it's undifferentiated. You're kneading clay off the top of the Apsu, and Enki's not playing a role. So you sort of wonder, what is it, sweet fresh water or bad water or poison water? But this is going to be what brings humans into existence. Next slide. So actually, go ahead and skip again. I'm going to move so Enki is really, it's a deep injustice for Sumerian culture to just talk about Enki. There was all kinds of wild and wonderful rituals, incantations, texts that we could have looked at, but I want to move us into the first millennium Mesopotamia. Slide. And before I get into the substances, I need to describe something that's really, really fascinating going on in scholarship on the ancient Near East right now, having to do with divinity and magic, and the issue of materiality. Where does matter come from? I'm going to speak briefly about the way that different gods' bodies were imagined as participating or relating to the world of substances. I'm going to talk about divinized objects, and then I'll go ahead and make my point, which is how we'll move forward. Go ahead and next slide. So this is just a brief example, but one of the coolest things about that we're starting to realize is that gods seem to have these what are called dispersed agencies or dispersed bodies. So they had bodies. And you'll see that gods are sometimes described as having a hand, and that hand might press something down, and that would be an illness. The hand is pressing. But the god's body is dispersed all throughout the natural world. So this is just an example of something called a divine body text in the first millennium. Notice all of the god's body parts and what substances they're showing up in. The palm frond, the palm is his beard. The cedar is his knees, the apple is his ankle bones, the snake is his penis, the harp is his hand, the cat is the blood of his heart. The partridge is a drop of his heart's blood. The pig is his inwards, or his innards. The scorpion is his lip. We don't have, I mean, every single one of these texts we could have so much fun with and talk about. What does it mean to encounter a scorpion and to feel that that encounter with that substance is somehow the god's body mediated to you? So that's one thing. Gods had very spread out bodies. The second thing is that objects could be worshipped or given offerings or even prayed to or treated as a god. I've just made a list of some of the things that get that distinction or are sort of marked by that divine state that gods also enjoyed. So city gates, ziggurats, temple doors, platforms for cult statues, pipes. I like the musical instruments personally. We'll see a picture of those in a sec. Crowns, beds. Your bed could be a divine being. I'm ready to go to bed, so I kind of get the making offerings to your bed. Weapons, musical instruments, and then so these are some of the complicating, very different cultural assumptions about the material world that maybe we do or do not share. I don't know if you can think about your own corollary experiences of being sort of like awed at something, like looking at the ocean and feeling awe, but we locate that as like a psychological or cognitive kind of thing, usually, although people can have spiritual experiences of things if we were to talk about ourselves today. But this dispersed divine body and the divinized objects, I want to add one more layer, one more possibility for us, and that is we know so much about magical practices in the ancient West Asia, many rituals and texts that would have been spoken in ritual settings or in practices. And a lot of these practices will involve materials that don't have any explicit, they're not explicitly marked as divine or described as part of the divine body, but they still have magical effects. It would be like taking an Advil and your headache goes away. I mean, it's very rare that you say, thank Advil that I mean, maybe we do, but thank Advil that my headache went away. But there's something effective or that works in the world because of its magical qualities. So that's sort of another category that I want to be open to. Next slide. So we could be looking at myths and we could be looking at stories that talk about objects, but I want to think about these ritual practitioners that emerged and took really center stage. They were the text makers, they were the ritual specialists. They started, much of the reason that we have any of the knowledge of the ancient world that we do is because of these these kinds of figures. So these are like priests or religious gurus or sort of magical medicine healers. You have the oracle diviner, the exorcist professional, and the lamentation singer. And each one of them, what we're about to do is we'll be thinking about a few texts and artifacts associated with them that help us start to see where dirt, air, and water are showing up. So go ahead for the next slide. One more. So the lamentation singer, you already saw that instruments could be divine. They could be considered gods. They had magical properties. The main thing, I think probably the main thing to say about the diviner, or the main two things to say. The first is that their music they were called upon to sing and to play in the context of a palace or a temple. And their lyrics were almost entirely about destruction. They were laments, they were sad songs about things not going well, but usually about a temple being destroyed or a city being destroyed. It's very interesting, and it's taken a while to realize this, but these songs were very rarely connected to actual destruction. They were connected to the feeling of destruction or the feeling that something wasn't going well. And so that they had these sort of like virtual lyrics that they sang. We'll go ahead to the next slide. They were involved in, I mean, some of these guys, it's like being overworked. They'll sometimes have like 6 or 7 songs a day, one at the morning, one at night, at sunset. They oftentimes, and I'm actually very interested in this, seem to have been prisoners or captives. And so their emotional tones would be brought even closer to the fore. But I want to just underline, this is one of the sort of canonical songs, and it's kind of amazing to think about a song lasting for 1,000 years. But these were copied and seem to have been repeated in many places. There were lots of calendars that told you when to sing these. So here's one that's just called "It Touches the Earth Like a Storm." It touches the earth like a storm. Its meaning is unfathomable. What are we talking about here? I chose this because it has a lot of resonances with Genesis 1. His word touches the earth like a storm. So we find out this is about a word, or which causes the heavens to rumble. I'm just going to go through some of these underlines. The earth to shake. His word is a swelling flood. So thinking about, remember, the lips could be a scorpion, like the word is showing up in the world as a flood. His word is a covered fermentation vat, and nobody knows what's inside it. His word drifts in the heavens, it kind of wanders. It's a storm which chases people and destroys families or displaces families. There was one part, oh, I love, sorry to move up just a tiny bit, where it says, his word whose interior is unknown, the exterior tramples down everything. His word whose exterior is unknown, its interior tramples down everything. I just think that's so cool. I couldn't not flag that one. As if the word has an outside appearance and an internal kind of sort of being. The storm has an outside appearance and an internal meaning. The storm, the vicious heart of Enlil. Another relevant one that gets sung a lot is called the defiled Apsu, and we already saw Enki was associated with the Apsu. This is the water, and this would have been sung in one of the places where Enki was associated, and had to do with that sort of feeling that the water that emerges, that's supposed to be distinguished and create fertility and health and happiness, that it was defiled. There was something messed up, and Enki, Enki wasn't discerning the waters. Next slide. So that was the Kalu. That was the lamentation priest. The oracle diviner, named the Baru. What we're looking at here is a liver. It's a clay tablet of a liver, and I'm very interested in this as being clay. Go ahead to the next slide. I wanted to give us a beautiful, what I think is a beautiful image, but something that might invite us to experience the concept of reading livers differently. The clay liver, I know, right? I see Max, Dr. Grossman, like going like this. It might make you feel a little bit odd, but that oddity is trying to help us move into understanding the power of these livers. So the body itself was understood to be some composition of dirt. The tablet of the liver is clay. And what the oracle diviner would do, this is one of the things that they would do, they would open up a sacrificial animal, usually a sheep, not a bird, and let its entrails spill out, find the liver. They might read the entrails or might read the liver. And the liver tablets were called the tablets of the gods. The gods were understood to have inscribed their communications in the language of a tablet, or in the language of a liver. And so I wanted us to see like jewelry flowing out of a bird, to imagine that there's something enticing or interesting or exciting, that there might be things that you would notice in the entrails that would make you thrilled because it was a good thing. The idea here is that you would be gaining information about, well, to put it kind of simply, about the future. What is going to unfold? Will I continue to be sick? Will the king succeed in this war? So you would ask these questions and come up with answers. So go ahead to the next slide. Do you guys like that picture? I was amazed that I found it. Actually, go ahead to the next slide. That's just a so the diviner, before they got ready to consult something, they might actually they would consult water and the way that water would flow, or how oil would behave with water, and that would communicate things from the gods. But this is a ritual preparation for getting ready, and I want us to just notice the water that's involved, or the objects or the substances. So after the Baru cleansed himself with holy water, he anoints himself with an oil that is from a plant that resists 1,000 diseases. So it's a powerful plant. He would dress in a pure garment with that was purified. The garment has been washed with tamarisk and soap. And he has to chew in his mouth chips of cedar or cypress on an empty stomach. Maybe that was for, some people think that was for dental things. So that would be like a rationalized way of explaining this. Next slide. So there's a roughly contemporary treatise about ritual symbolism, and it's hard to say that every ritual always meant this to somebody, but it definitely tells us more than we might imagine from this ritual. So this is like it would have been a tablet that you could consult to find out what each of your ritual objects meant, to bring kind of more meaning for it. The jar of holy water, the agubu, this cleansing himself with holy water, at least according to this treatise, was associated with a deity, a queen of incantations, who is the goddess of the pure waters of the fountains, of the lower world. We've already noticed that it was anxiety producing which waters we're getting from the underground. So here's a way to ensure that the fountains and the oceans from underneath are pure waters. And this is the bar would wash in this. A few others, the tamarisk, the head of a date palm. It's sometimes frustrating because not everything matches up. It's never a perfect thing. Actually, it's good for people to know how hard this work is. But the cypress, I thought, he's eating chips of cypress, but the cypress, according to this treatise, is something that the god Adad, who is the god of thunder and rain. So we're seeing water and thunder and noise, the way that clouds can storm in and that colors can be generated. The cypress, in eating the cypress, if the ritual practitioner has this in the mind, this would have been at least the cognitive worldview, if not the aesthetic meaning from this moment. Go ahead and to the next slide. I have a lot of slides about the Ashipu. This is an exorcist, and this is what I've been working on the most these days. But these are medical practitioners who they became the masters of every single kind of divinatory knowledge. They actually kind of oversaw some of the other guys that we've just looked at. But I might, if you don't mind, could we go ahead? This is a deity or a demon, excuse me, that would have caused illness, and he has wings. This is actually my summary slide, and it may be all we have time for. The exorcist would, in order to heal people of a disease that nobody could tell what, or bad, just negative things that are going on. This could be cleansing a house, cleansing a person, something bad happened to you, you have an illness, you have a fever. Part of his ritual would be to build a figurine. So he would travel to a clay pit, and he would where he would make his figurine, and the pit was often called, whenever it's named, the Apsu, that subterranean ocean. So he's pulling clay out of this watery pit. The figurines that he's using that are made of clay are called creatures of the Apsu. He also might make ones from wood, which are called creatures from heaven. So there's sort of orientation and cosmic kind of geography being summoned by the substances. His diagnosis of bodily symptoms, if I was the exorcist and you were sick, I would look at you and say, wow, your face looks a little red. And that would give me information about the agent that's afflicting you. The three main categories of things that could be causing harm, either to your body or to your sort of livelihood or well-being, were different airs. And this is the first time that we've really seen airs show up, which is why I'm so interested in The Exorcist. That's not to say there haven't been winds and stuff, but airs could be spirits. Evil spirits were sometimes conceived as wind. So wind, spirits, ghosts, and seeds were all associated with air. It could be a divine force that's causing a problem. Either the god is angry, or in both cases, he's probably angry, but the anger can be directly impacting the body or the substance. And it can also be a hand. Or it could be other humans that are causing your misfortune. So you could have broken an oath or sinned. There's also folks can enact antagonistic magic against you to make you like pull you down, and you like have to fight back by doing a ritual. Or other people can curse you, and that could cause ongoing either disease, affliction, or suffering. Next. I just am gonna, you're just gonna have to trust me that the winds were huge subjects of poetry and of ritual imagination. There's a really famous set of winds called the Seven that were kind of like the evil conglomerate that caused all kinds of things. But I just want you to see the kind of like the wind and the hurricane and the evil wind. Next slide. Next slide. It's just an example of, I wanted you to see a tablet that was about these ritual instructions for making a figurine. When the figurine was made, in this one, the exorcist made 15 figurines of 15 evil spirits from various substances, fat, dough, or clay. And as the ritual proceeded, they would destroy the 15 figurines, either transforming them into ash or into mud if it was water, or into dust if it was something that was going to be physically destroyed. And in doing this act, destroying the figurine, it destroyed the bodies of the evil spirits and the enchanted substances that manifested on the body as symptoms of affliction. Meaning, as soon as if it was an effective ritual, the figurine would get destroyed and turn into this dissolved substance. At the same time, the body would be released from the spirit's agency or the materialization in the body. Let's go ahead. Go ahead. This is diagnostic medicine, where you would notice, you would talk about the body as having ghosts or spirits in different symptoms. This was an example of the wind afflicting someone. I'm going to move on though. I'd like to, I wish I did have control right now, because then I would know how fast to go. Next slide. Oh, I do have to mention this. The last figure is the omen interpreter. Go ahead to the next slide. This is a tablet that shows Shamash. And if you can see where the arrow is pointed, there's an inscription there. And right above it are 3 celestial entities. As the first millennium went on, people became less and less interested in the underwater because it was so hard to manage and differentiate, and became much more interested in what the skies were telling people about their fate. So the inscription up here says, Sin, Shamash, and Ishtar, 3 deities, are set over against the heavenly ocean. If you can see the kind of ripply lines underneath Shamash's the scene that he's on, the ripply lines are meant to be that underwater ocean that we'd been talking about that's associated with Enki. And here you have a really bold statement that we are no longer looking for the waters to be discerned, but it is the celestial information. And it's interesting, the stars were also called the tablet of the gods, or the voice or the writing of the gods. So the way that the stars were configured and how they were behaving, especially if there was an eclipse or not. This was considered information from the gods. So our sort of focus of substance is shifting to the celestial realm. Next slide. Lastly, there's a very famous text that omen interpreters would read called the Enuma Anu Enlil. And several of the tablets are about weather omens, and this is relevant to us. You have thunder, lightning, rainbows, and earthquakes, rain, fog, and mud, and wind. I really wish this was like an entire class, because reading these is so amazing. If the fog emerges from the ground, that means something. If the fog rolls in from the west, it means something. And they're always associated with very specific outcomes that we might find very fanciful. But if we were to really be able to walk and step in, maybe they would make sense to us. So anyway, these substances had predictive power and magical power to kind of give you information about how is the cosmos kind of orienting around you and creating the conditions that you're experiencing. Okay. Go ahead. Yes. I want to read, I've done the underlining. I want to read Genesis 1 and 2 with some of these thoughts in mind. And again, some of the sort of philological syntax and appreciation is we may not have time to really pause and go into that, but it gets, as many of you who study this know, it gets more and more interesting the more you go. But Genesis 1 is set up as a creation story with 6 days. And so it's very easy to move through its different days. This first day, we have darkness covering the face of the deep. That word for deep is related to Tiamat, the deity who birthed Enki. So she's the salt water. So there's some imagination that we can bring to that, but darkness covering the face of the deep. A wind of God swept over the face of the waters. These winds were mostly negative in first millennium medicine, but here it's more like potentiality. What kind of wind will this end up being? I would imagine if you were a reader at this time, you'd be like, well, that's counterfactual. That's a little surprising that we have a wind. That sounds menacing. Darkness and wind, these are both menacing things. But then we see that the light is good. None of the rest of it is called good, just the light. And God distinguished between the light and the darkness. So he's sort of pulling apart light and darkness. Next slide. Then we have this day 2 that befuddles a lot of people. And correct me if I'm wrong. I don't have my notes in front of me, but I was kind of surprised to realize that there's no that and it was good on this day. This is not a good day. It's not a bad day, but it's not a good day. Let there be a dome, this dome in the midst of the waters, and it will distinguish. It will be the distinguisher between waters and waters. And God called the dome heaven. So, or this Shemaim. There's something going on this day that got me real after thinking about substances, and I hope you're with me a little bit here. It's really fascinating that the waters are this ability to distinguish waters is part of the creation story, but it's not moralized. It's not called good. It's not called bad. It's part of the problem of the cosmos, if you will, for the writer, that waters can't be distinguished from each other, or that that we're trying to distinguish the waters, not with a deity associated with the waters, but with the sky or the heaven itself. Next, day 3. And God said, let the waters under the sky be gathered together. So we're gathering waters now into one place so that dryness can be seen. This dryness is going to be called earth. The waters that were gathered together, mikveh, he calls seas. So these things are sort of pulled apart. Really, the waters are pulled out and the dryness starts to emerge. Like whoever said sort of water and seaweed about this image that we had at the beginning, or it's interesting to call it an animal, but the earth is starting to emerge. The body or something is starting to emerge. Next. So, and then day 4 is about the lights in the sky, which we saw by the first millennium. This is becoming the more trustworthy place to look. Students are often, and I was always fascinated by this too, that are we talking about astrology here? Like we're creating the lights in the dome of the sky to be signs for the seasons and for the days and the years. These omen interpreters who were looking to the dome to interpret the lights. God made the 2 great lights, the greater light and the lesser light, not named and probably intentionally in order to distinguish this text from the Shamash and the Sin, the moon god. And also kind of the stars is just so like, oh yeah, we made the stars too. They're there too. But these are created to rule over the day and the night and to separate the light from the darkness. It's interesting that they play a role in separating light and darkness that God had played earlier. So this is actually a quite bold statement about the importance of the dome and of the skies, but also a differentiation from some of the practices in first millennium Babylonia, not looking to Shamash or the sun god or the moon god. But the need to know and be able to read the stars was a big concern for understanding how one's social world and life was developing. Next slide. Okay, and day 5, now the waters are bringing forth swarms of living creatures. This is pretty fascinating because the waters are, I haven't emphasized this, but often people will say, God said, let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures. And it isn't in that, that's not actually the sort of grammar that's being presented here. I didn't emphasize this earlier, but these sort of powerful substances, waters, are able to bring forth swarms of living creatures. The birds they just show up. Nobody makes them. They're just flying across the dome. They're somehow already there. God does create the sea monster and then every living creature that moves in every kind. The waters are swarming and fill the waters and the seas. So there's like a kind of new image of the water being developed here with we already saw Enki associated with fish, but there's a pulling away from having a deity to discern the waters and instead just noticing that there are monsters and swarms in these waters. Next slide. I think we have time. Dr. Grossman, do we have time to look at Genesis 2? Because is there time?
I do want people to have a chance to talk, but is it satisfying to breeze through it a little bit, or would it be more satisfying to let it be and talk about what we've seen so far?
I think I do want to just breeze through it.
Okay.
I'll go fast though. So I'll do slide. Genesis 2, rain, a concern about rain. There's a stream that's rising up and waters the ground. There's no plants, no vegetation yet. So I thought this desert scene it's really focusing in on the water that's rising from underneath. Next slide. And then God makes the human from the dust of the ground. All we have right now is water from underneath, which is sketch, and dust, and breathes into the nostrils. So we have this air that we had earlier seen. What do we think about wind? Now here we have breathing and breath as a different word than these different kinds of winds that may be mostly nefarious. Next slide. So then we have the ground participating. I think of just the importance of rivers. It's often overlooked, but the way that rivers are also associated with other important stones and substances that were important in rituals we haven't talked about them, so it won't make a lot of sense, but stones had sort of enchanted properties as well. Next slide. And yep, that's all that I was going to do. I do have this conversation is I have a section that I smartly pulled out of this presentation, but it has to do with the way that these texts are being read today and environmental issues. I'm happy to talk about that, but I won't go through those slides. So.
I cannot thank you enough. I feel like you have at least a semester's worth, if not
I
a
know.
book or two here. I am going to open the floor to questions. I just have to say that as someone who's taught Hebrew Bible and as someone who's been teaching a lot to my students this semester about local religions, I feel like you've given me so much to work with here. And like anybody else, I can talk about the demythologization. I can't say it, but I can talk about it in the first 2 chapters of the book of Genesis. But you've shown us how that happens and why that happens. So from one Bible nerd to another, and to you as an ancient Near East nerd, you have created so many links and so much workable material here. But I know we have people here who have a million questions, including people who've been studying what is religion, people who've been studying the Gilgamesh, people who are studying the ancient Near East more generally. I would love to open the floor. You can raise your hand if you have questions. And I'd love to ask whether Professor Siriano or any friends or students or participants would like to go first.
Oh, let me just say really quickly, this is a wonderful talk. I enjoyed it greatly. I'm kind of curious to hear questions from we have several students, both Professor Grossman. So,
Anything. I mean, it doesn't have to be super related. It's just that the sort of things that come off of this would be
Sure.
great.
Yeah, yeah. I see familiar names, and I know that we have some religious studies and RAIM and Jewish studies folks here. But does anybody should not feel shy. If you have questions about anything from dirt to air to water, give a holler. Stephanie, would you like to jump in? I know you've been working on Gilgamesh. You don't know me, but I see your name.
Were you mentioning me?
Yes.
I had some questions about the creatures. What else do you know about depictions of creatures and otherness? Because they seem to always define them as dark monsters and boundary creatures. And as they pull apart the water, the creatures are revealed like they should be in like a netherworld kind of.
Mm. I love, oh wow, you just said a lot of wonderful things, Stephanie. Is it Stephanie? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, hybrid creatures. The place that my mind goes is the sort of, well, just in general, the kind of the way that we depict things that are scary, and that feel menacing or ominous, uh, trying to patch together concepts that don't fit together. I actually think there's something terrifying about monsters, but something incredibly smart about building a monster or thinking about hybrid entities, because as you said, there might be like a lower half and an upper half, and the lower half is kind of explained. Like if you just take this idea that the waters underneath the world had some kind of power. Some deities were depicted as having sort of watery undersides, or the sages would have had like fish below. Is there,
I think someone is unmuted. Can you check and make sure you're muted?
but putting together, like if we take this idea that deities have dispersed their body parts around, like the scorpion is the lip or something, and something else, putting them together may feel monstrous in the categories of life, but having hybrid beings to help you explain things that kind of like the fractures in our understanding of the world. It's a really actually productive thing to do, and I think it's interesting, people who talk about thinking about monsters as not always harbingers of negative. They can be transformative too. They show up at fractures of experience and can either help create the bridge to cross something that's uncrossable, or they might just need to be fought and moved away from. I don't know if that gets to your question, Stephanie. It sounds like you have some really interesting thoughts behind your question.
That answers it wonderfully. I was reading a lot about Gilgamesh because I'm in the Gilgamesh course, and all the creatures are guardians of liminal areas. And you describing them as fractures makes complete sense. It's almost like you need a monster to fix the fracture. Like the unknown is connected to an unknown creature, so they kind of like even each other out in this area-ish.
That's awesome. I can't, I don't know who's teaching that class, but it would be so much fun to be in a Gilgamesh class right now.
It's Professor Soriano who's with us today.
Good times, good times. Yeah, the Humbaba character is so interesting. His face is, he's guarding a forest, but his face is entrails. And to think about the kind of communications of his face and his growls and his anger, and Gilgamesh, Enkidu and Gilgamesh's tendency or their instinct to destroy him, instead of becoming interested in him or seeing. Remember, I knew this would be memorable, that bird with the pearls falling out. Not to be interested in the information of his face, but rather to treat the sort of like malformations of his face or the anger that's coming from him, to treat it as something that needs to be destroyed, and a boundary that needs to be conquered, as opposed to kind of something that could mediate an aesthetic or an enchanted or a divine experience. I love that book so much. I wish I could talk to you guys more about it. Well, maybe we can.
Richard Sember, did you have a comment or a question you wanted to make?
Sort of. Kind of in the Western antiquity, I don't remember at what point it solidifies, but you get earth, air, fire, and water as the elements.
Yeah.
And you're describing an environment in which it's earth, air, and water as the elements. So is there a relationship between the Western and Eastern? And if so, what happened to fire?
Man, oh
Nice.
my God, that is such a brilliant question, actually. I could have talked about fire. The glowing that we saw in Ezekiel was all about embers and heat
Mm,
and that kind of thing. There's plenty of powerful enchanted fire. I omitted it because I knew I wanted to talk about sort of the ecological anthropology of the West. That
mm,
um, Western humans, if we, I think we, at this point, I think we could talk about the West again. Um, Western humans and their relation, their imagine, sort of the heritage of the way we imagine humans are related to the natural world.
mhm,
I actually think there might be something really interesting in your question about why fire kind of
mhm,
got left out of the fundamental kind of makings of the human. I mean, there's certainly the fear of destruction by fire, and you have prophets like Ezekiel or Jeremiah kind of like burning inside, or coals being hot to Isaiah's mouth. So there's like fire plays a role, but um, it almost makes me sorry to do a very big like kind of meta cultural statement, but it almost makes me think that we're not that comfortable with anger in the West.
mhm.
We're not comfortable when we see it. We think we need to fight it. Actually, that comment about Humbaba's face. I mean, that's like
Mhm.
I'm out there in like speculative realism with Octavia Butler right now, but I think that one of the reasons I like studying cultural studies is precisely the question you just asked about like, could we say fundamental things about how we're oriented towards our environments and our natural worlds and to ourselves by tracing the way that our sort of how we've understood our physical substances and how we describe those. It's a great, Richard, do you have a thought about that? It's
Well,
a,
anger is very deprecated in Jewish literature and also in the Greek philosophy
yeah.
and in Christianity. I mean, if you include the if you include the Jews in the West here, and I'm not sure you can, eventually it all flows together, during the Romans. But I just note, I mean, anger is very, very deprecated.
Mhm.
Uh, Even now, we talk about anger management.
Yeah.
I mean, there are good reasons for anger to be deprecated,
Mhm.
but um,
Yeah.
but anger is definitely one of God's biblical God's characteristics. There's no doubt about that either. Very pronounced.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't really have a conclusion here. It's just very interesting. What was we ended up totally different from. I mean, what was really behind my question originally was the idea that these three elements in the East or the Near East, you're talking about a period, at least 500 to minimum 500 years before classical Greece.
Mhm.
During classical times, this whole question of what are the elements, what is the world physically made out of, hadn't congealed, for lack of a better word, into four elements of earth, air, fire, and water. I'm not sure when that became canonical, but I think it was, you know, um, it became so in Roman antiquity, you know,
Yeah.
um, around the time of Christ. Again, I'm not a scholar in this, but so my question really had to do with migration of ideas.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
it wasn't at all about the value, the psychological value or coloration given to these elements. But when you said that, that's really interesting because, like I said, anger is so deprecated in the Jewish wisdom tradition, but it's so pronounced as one of God's characteristics in the Bible. I mean, it's. I mean, people make jokes about God needing anger management classes and things like that. I mean, I saw some jokes like that somewhere. So it's and I've even seen his treatment. Maybe I'm going on too long here, but his treatment of the Jewish people in the destruction of the first temple, can course, they blame themselves, but you can only, the language in the prophets is really the language of domestic abuse.
Yeah.
I can,
Yeah.
to be,
Richard, can I pivot just a
yeah,
tiny bit?
but I'm going on too long
No,
because
you're doing great. You're great. But I'm thinking, Ingrid, that a lot of the people, some of the people who are on this talk have recently, in this last week, been talking about Hinduism. And one of the things we talked about when we discussed Hinduism was the aspect of destruction, not as a negative, and it might include anger, but it's part of a larger cycle. And one of the things I think we see with a lot of the sort of biblical tradition is a reduction in cycling. There is cycling, but it's short cycles, and it's not the same kind of sense that the whole universe is in states of constant cycles. And once you have lots of chances, destruction is just part of the process. Would you say that the ancient Near Eastern traditions are more linear in their cycles, like short cycling, or is there more of a sense of big eternity, like you get in something like the classical Hindu tradition?
Yeah.
Because I
I
feel like the biblical tradition is responding to the larger ancient Near Eastern cultural formations in a very selective way.
Yeah. It's such a good question. I'm so glad to I wanted to mention too, like Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine. I teach in our medical and liberal arts. So your question is actually kind of hitting me in those places. But I think the rise, gosh, it's been a long time since I've thought about this, but the rise of eschatology, the projection forward, the sense that there's a doomsday coming, and often it is battles, it's storms, it's wrath, that's coming. There's like this anticipation mode that kind of gets canonicalized, if you will, and that the effort is to just project it further and further forward, but it's still always kind of looming. And I know I can't speak. I was just actually talking to somebody the other day. I don't actually know anything, I realized, about whether how active or what the threads are in Jewish eschatology. But in Christian eschatology, it is so significant that we have never escaped the sort of this one narrative that we're sort of trying to forestall and trying to forestall a doom instead of just letting doom come and sweeping, like letting the sort of cycles. I think in the ancient Near East, I mean, people say there was an appreciation of the cyclical nature of these things, but it was so often, um, it was so attached to political well-being and economic well-being that I think, and I don't actually know how to describe the sort of why the Hindu concepts of destruction would have been seen as productive. I think the social and political order question is for me really interesting about that. Yeah, Andrew.
So in this discussion about cycles and destruction, so I'm a soil science student, and I'm thinking about the natural cycles, and how, so if ancient humans are developing omens in order to project certain ideas, there's this concept of natural phenomenon recurring. But how much are these people thinking about that as cycles, as being able to predict these things coming and the destruction or elements of change that are associated with them? Yeah, does that make?
It does. I mean, I think there's a reason why why the sort of there's like an appreciation of observational knowledge. It's bound up in magic, and it's bound up in other things like our aesthetics and I don't know, like whether we like certain kinds of food or whatever, all these cultural factors. But there's an appreciation of observation like you're talking about. But I don't quite know how to take your question. I think it's a really good one, but I don't know if this is going to hit you right. But one of the things that I've noticed is that the social world is as significant of a domain of power and enchantment as the natural, if that makes sense. And so, like I talked about spirits and ghosts and agents of affliction, but that human, I've been thinking a lot about how much, the concept of the Satan, the Hasatan, the person who accuses and the way in which malevolence, social malevolence was sort of like, it almost like rose to a higher degree of cosmology, way more than I would ever want in my own life. You know what I mean? Like if I'm having like sort of an arch rival, or I'm like in a fight with my dad or something like that, I don't want that to take on cosmic significance. I want to believe that you can either live and let live, or you figure it out. You know what I mean? But I don't know if that's the strange way to take your question, but sort of the noticing of observation wasn't just about substances. It was also about social relations and the relation of the king. And so much of religion was about getting into the favor of the king, that I think I think the way that social relations took on cosmological values.
That seems linked to the concept of the lamentation singers.
Mhm.
And can you talk a little bit about the link about like why they're focusing on destruction? And it's how often are these sad stories, the stories of destruction, about natural causes versus these social causes?
Yeah.
And how might that play into the social realm of the authority? And like,
That is such a brilliant question. That's such a good question. You are so right. Your instincts are so correct. Those laments are about temple destructions. Uh, they get recycled, and so if ever they were attached to actual lament after a temple was destroyed, they started to be sung at the beginning of building a temple in order to kind of like purge it and stuff like that. But if you read the lyrics of all of those laments, half of them, I mean, almost all of them at some point are about how like the lamentation priest isn't allowed to do his job anymore, or he's been told that his omens are bad and he's not pure enough or something. You know what I mean? Like the sort of the social sadness is a very significant feature of those. And and like I said, there's a lot of work being done on those right now. And I'm not in a position to do this research, but I really think that there's a lot of imprisonment and captivity and forced lamentation, and like sort of causing suffering in order to produce something called this sort of like magical voice that could assuage the gods. So I don't really like the ethics of all of that stuff, but you have a very good instinct for asking that question. I don't know.
thank you.
Yeah.
And then one more thing. So I had to miss a small period near the beginning. I think I missed some parts about about Apsu and Enki and the water from the underground. It's very interesting to me because I do a lot with clay, and that association makes a lot of sense to me from a naturalistic perspective, but I might have been missing something from the more mythological perspective.
Oh, no, I actually think being a soil scientist gives you like an incredibly advantageous kind of perspective on this, because I mean, I would say we're pretty bored. Like dirt, okay, that's great. It's like trash. We don't think about it. We just get rid of it. You know what I mean? Or like maybe
One of
we
the
care,
things
but
I was thinking about is so we have these clay tablets that they're inscribing and using. There's a lot of clay. So
there's a lot of clay.
I looked at the soil map and what kinds of soils. There are some clay-rich soils, but you can manufacture clay, and to
Uh-huh.
do that, you submerge it in water. And so sand and silt separate out first, and clay is by definition that which is suspended in water after those larger minerals separate out. And
Okay.
so that association between clay, and also clay is what is chemically active. And so there are like legitimate reactions that are happening and
Yeah.
uses. And so it makes sense that the clay specifically is the enchanted element in this
Yeah.
case.
Oh my gosh, that is so fascinating. I mean, I think the way that you're headed, every single mineral, I mean, I was just reading a book on color, and it was all about, and you're just thinking about how much appreciation there is for every little nuance of soil, of mineral, of processes that you can do to induce different properties in dirt and substance. And I think I have a tremendous amount of respect for ancient knowledge, and so much of that knowledge has been destroyed and wasn't. That's part of my point, actually, is that these texts don't make sense in the ways that I think they, I mean, they obviously, we make sense of them. We've inherited them and we make sense of them. But bringing that kind of knowledge to sort of the fine discernment of how, even talking about minerals being purged from clay, you know, different metals were sometimes divinized or had godlike properties, so they could be dangerous or good depending on how they were showing up. So, and then, you know, metallurgy and pulling apart metals is also really, anyway, I think we could use a soil scientist in our field.
Thank you, Drew. I'm so glad you jumped in. Would one or two other people like to ask questions either about the texts or the evidence, or Matt, you just sat forward. Would you like to bring some ancient Near East compadre energy?
I've really enjoyed the questions from our students. I think this has been such an engaging talk. It's been delightful. So I kind of feel reticent about it. I mean, I used to see Ingrid every year at SBL, and I stopped going to SBL. And so there's a lot of catch up I'd love to do as well. Yeah. No, go right ahead.
No, I have a t-shirt that says, "Call me and let's catch up," and it has like a bottle on it.
I really loved your answer, your interaction with Stephanie's question and the whole Humbaba Huwawa thing. It made me think of the phenomena of clay Humbaba masks that would be deposited in temples, and there you've got the element of clay, okay, and it's baked into the mask that replicates not just entrails, but entrails that form the monstrous face of Humbaba, and then on the reverse side they would have instructions. This is the face of Humbaba, and this is how you should read this this ritual text. And I don't know if I just thought I'd throw that out there. I would love to hear any further thoughts you might have on that, because there you have the elements combined with the entrails of an animal that forms the face of a mythological.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I followed you. I really like the way you put that, where you put it all. I mean, I think it's just, for people who don't know Humbaba, it's kind of fun to hear that. And some of you sound like Gilgamesh experts, so I'm telling you things you already know. But he was sort of the entrail circular thing was also kind of associated with the elephant trunk, is my understanding. And so there's sort of like these body parts that are like bizarre and strange and kind of map onto other things. But I don't know. I'm not exactly sure how to move off of your question, but was it kind of like, why does his face get associated with entrails?
Well, is there? I mean, I never really had thought much about the materiality, the clayness of these masks.
Oh, of the masks, yeah.
And so, but your talk got me thinking about that.
Yeah. I wonder if we could, I love it when I can think of a quick analogy to contemporary life, but I can't necessarily. But I think like it sort of feels like maybe it's like a knockoff Fendi bag or something like that. Like you don't have the tablet of the gods, but you can have a Humbaba face and hang it in your house. I mean, I would imagine that much like we like, I don't know, cultures who care about blood type and have little charms about their blood type on their keychain or something like that, that means something. There's like personality traits associated with your blood type. I imagine having these masks, there would be differences about where like protrusions happen and how contours are that would be meaningful in some way. So yeah, I think I think cultures often will take something visual, and much like our memes, today we kind of riff on it, and those riffings are meaningful. So I don't have a more insightful answer to that, but I think you're right. The sort of, you got me thinking about the connection to the liver tablets a little bit more explicitly. That's I wonder if it's a way of being like the folk medicine version or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's the cool thing about all this material. We know so little, and we can just, but it gives us lots of space.
I know.
Well,
Does anybody do pottery?
We do not have pottery folks here. I think we probably have some people who would love to do pottery, but That would be very cool.
You know, Ingrid, you say that, my advisor, my former advisor at UCLA, Bill Schneidman, his wife is now a potter,
Hmm.
works with clay. She makes beautiful clay vessels. So, I mean, I would love to, it would be great if they were part of this conversation. I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I have a confession to make. I've been thinking a lot now about the biblical creation narratives and some of the other I don't mean to marginalize the Near Eastern creation narratives. I just don't know them as well. And the question of why the various powers didn't actually use fire, as Richard noted, and go ahead and fire their little people, so then they'd be, unbreakable.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm weaving all sorts of stories there. And I think, Ingrid, I have to say, materiality, as you've demonstrated, is such a remarkable way to think about not only individual work of artisans, but
Mhm.
also individual experience, collective imagination,
Yeah.
and especially the ancient anthropological, what these people who are so far from us thought it meant to be human.
Mhm.
And that materiality and the valences of that materiality both feel so important in a way that, for people trained to do philology, there's like a, is it a noun? Is it a verb? What's the part of speech here? And you've no, I mean, that's
I mean, I love
I
doing
love
that.
a
I
good
obviously went
pronoun.
in there, but yeah.
But I need a t-shirt that says ask me about pronouns in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right? But you've shown that we can get from the letters on the page or the cuts in the tablet all the way out and back again in ways that are just really quite meaningful.
I appreciate you saying that because that's my favorite thing to do is my mom taught me to pay attention to small things and my dad taught me to think big. And I just really enjoy, I love material. I love texts because you can think about pronouns or you can think about the deepest questions of the universe. And I love substances for the same reason. Once you become a soil scientist like Andrew or a potter like Matthew's PhD advisor's wife, I have a friend who makes paints, and she's been starting to get really into this to go around and to try to find new powders and substances or plants in order to make paints. Like it just, I think there's a whole sensory world that that got destroyed. Our knowledge and ability to commune with it. At least that's my experience of the modern world, is that I'm not really encouraged to use sensory intelligence. And I think it's really sad that these texts they were so interesting and beautiful and grappling with really important things, and I would never disparage them, but they were involved in the destruction also of of complicated knowledge. All knowledge is complicated, but yeah.
And those things are deeply, deeply human.
Yeah.
I see that Drew has a question. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question or make a comment?
I'm
So why don't we let Drew and Richard have their parting shots, and then we will thank you all for your participation today. Drew, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. So I have two comments. One, just a brief comment. So my advisor does soil painting. So there's a lot of different soils and redox things that have different colors. And so you could try water painting with them sometime.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's a really cool concept. And then Dr. Grossman, I had an idea related to the firing of clay that so we've talked about before about kind of divine beings or non-human beings being more essential, and a common theme being that humans or that the material world is where change can be made in one spirit. So when we fire clay, it sets it. It
Right.
cements it essentially. And unfired clay is more malleable. And so I wonder if the unfired clay is then a more apt metaphor for.
I think you're exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those were my two.
Love
That conversation is so interesting. Drew, it makes me go back to to that first quote that I had from Psalms that you took me up out of the miry clay. This idea that the human is malleable, and yet the value. I know this idea that the heart is where the tablet of the heart, that there's like a firing that needs to take place for language to be preserved. I think there's actually a lot with this drying and wet, hard and soft modalities that you're thinking in.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It looks like Jay, Richard, would you like the parting shot, or would you like to make your comment now? And
I'll
why
just
don't you go ahead, Richard, and then Jay will get to you next. And Matt, did you have a comment as well? Okay,
Did you want me to go or?
please do.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say until like just the beginning in the 18th century, in the middle or late 18th century, until then, nobody understood anything almost about materials at a theoretical way. They only knew and they knew a lot because they had a very complicated material civilization, but it was all from handling the materials.
Yeah.
There was no theory. So this is what, in terms of what Ingrid was saying about losing our relationship to the material world. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Just
Very, very interesting.
Yeah, that's
Jay? Jay Miller is one of our wonderful regulars. Jay, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just had a comment that you can see I come from an astronomy background. When I look at the first sentence in Genesis, God began to create the heavens and the earth. I can think of that in an astronomical way because that's what happened. You had the Big Bang and you had the universe beginning, and after 300 and some thousand years, then you had light because it took that long for light to come out.
Yeah.
So Genesis, the beginning of Genesis, really has an astronomical aspect to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I teach, I do a little, I'm a science, I have a physics background actually. That was my undergraduate degree.
I'm a biophysicist.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think there's a reason I like the ancient sciences. I wish I understood them better, but I think I enjoy, I think it's really interesting to talk about the way that the biblical narrative kind of shaped the imagination of Western Enlightenment science. Not just, we talk a lot about how science had to sort of demythologize our understanding of things, but I think there's a really important mythologizing that took place too and shaped how we think about the world. I don't know. I read a little bit about string theory and like sort of multiple universes, and I think
Yes.
maybe Genesis doesn't have it right if those things are true, or you know what I mean. But I really appreciate your comment. I'm glad that I really like your background too. I don't know what it is.
It's the sun. It's a sunspot group. I'm basically a solar astronomer.
Okay, awesome.
Well, Professor Lilly, I just want to thank you so much. And if folks want to flip your screen on and say thank you or give a little wave, this was
I
a
appreciate
delight.
all the hangers on.
And we'll look forward to seeing you, speaking with you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you,
thanks to everyone who was here.
thank you for
Have a
holding.
good one, everybody.
Thank you, Avis. Thank you, Max. Yes,
Yes.
it was really wonderful to be with you all. I'm impressed with your conversations that you have in your department.
We're very grateful and very lucky. And thanks so much to Avis, of course, who makes all things happen.
Yeah.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for answering my question in such detail.
Oh, sure. It was such a good question, Stephanie.
Take care, and we'll see you soon.
take care.
Talk to you soon, Ingrid. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.